She remembered the knock at the door, not loud, not rushed, just deliberate. A soldier stood outside, not in full gear but formal black, holding a sealed envelope. Her hands trembled as she took it. Her name was written in beautiful calligraphy. Inside, it was not a threat. It was an invitation. Please join us for dinner at the presidential residence, a celebration of service and leadership, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Her husband, Colonel Yusuf Barema, had already received his copy. She found it resting on his desk the night before, next to his uniform and a half-empty glass of whiskey. "It's nothing," he said. "Protocol dinner, formality." But his voice was strange. She had lived beside him for 21 years. She knew his voice when he was lying. That night, he dressed slower than usual. He kissed her hand instead of her forehead. He told their son, "Study hard, I'll be back before you sleep." But his eyes didn't match his words. At the residence, the room was magnificent. Candlelight, crystal, everything too perfect. She stood among other wives, all smiling politely, unaware. The guards weren't tense. The staff were polite. And then dessert arrived. That's when it happened. Her husband froze, not because of the food, but because of what was under the silver dome. Papers, not sweets, evidence. She heard the voice of Captain Traoré, calm but cutting. "I wanted to see how many of you would still come eat with the man you plan to kill." Her breath caught. She looked at her husband. He was pale, lips pressed shut. She grabbed his hand. "Yusuf, what is this?" But he didn't answer. He didn't look at her. Then the doors opened and they, the families, were escorted in. It was not just punishment, it was unveiling. She stood behind him, her hand still clutching his. That's when she heard it. "You will go home in disgrace." One man fell to his knees, others broke into tears. But her husband didn't move, didn't speak, until Traoré passed by him, pausing only once. "You disappointed me," he said. "Not because you joined the coup,
He was
but
welcomed
because I thought
warmly
you
in
never
typical
would."
Russian style.
And for the first time in 2 decades, she saw fear in Yusuf's eyes, not of death, but of having disappointed a man he once admired. They were stripped of rank the next morning. Their home was searched, accounts frozen, friends disappeared, neighbors whispered, but Yusuf never spoke in his defense. Until one night, weeks later, when she confronted him in the kitchen, voice cracking. "Tell me the truth. Did you betray him?" He shook his head, slowly. "No," he said, "but someone wanted it to look like I did." He pulled out a small drive. This was never presented. Surveillance footage, a meeting he never attended, a transfer he never signed, a voice on the wiretap that was not his. "Why didn't you show this to Traoré?" she asked, breathless. "Because it doesn't matter," Yusuf replied. "In war, the appearance of betrayal is enough, and I stayed silent too long." The next day, she went to the presidential office alone. She waited 5 hours, refused to leave. And when she was finally granted 5 minutes, she didn't plead for her husband. She placed the drive on the desk. "You don't owe us anything," she said. "But truth deserves the chance to defend itself." Traoré didn't speak. He just stared at the screen. And when the door closed behind her, she saw something flicker in his expression. Regret, or worse, doubt. That night, he called an emergency review with internal intelligence. And in the days that followed, one truth unraveled. Not all traitors had betrayed. Some had simply been chosen to fall. In the shadows of power, justice isn't clean. It is sharp, fast, and sometimes wrong.
And Captain Ibrahim Traoré, for all his brilliance, now had one more name to carry on his conscience, not because he failed to punish evil, but because he nearly punished loyalty mistaken for silence. They thought he didn't know, that he was too busy with international alliances, too trusting of the men who stood behind him at press conferences and saluted him in military briefings. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré had always known the real war wasn't at the border, it was at his own table. The whispers started as static. Tiny discrepancies in logistics, sudden reassignments, quiet conversations cut short when he entered the room. At first, he watched. Then he waited. And when he was certain, he did not scream. He did not arrest. He sent invitations, handwritten, sealed with his personal crest. A formal dinner at the presidential residence, private, intimate. Only 12 men were invited, all of them ranking officers, all of them implicated in the plot. The men arrived one by one, dressed in crisp uniforms, faces composed, masks perfected. They exchanged tight smiles, subtle nods, each unsure how much the others knew or if the president had any idea. But the dining hall was warm, the table exquisitely set, and Traoré greeted each of them with the same tone he always used, measured, courteous, unreadable. "Welcome, gentlemen. Tonight we break bread." They toasted to national unity, to stability, to a future they all believed in. The food was flawless. Courses arrived with elegance. Waiters moved like shadows. Wine was poured. Silence was strategic. Then dessert arrived, and with it, the real message. One by one, silver cloches were removed, and beneath each was not cake, not fruit, but a single sheet of paper folded. The men hesitated. Traoré nodded once. "Go ahead. Read." They opened them. Each sheet contained the same thing, a copy of a bank transaction, a phone call transcript, or a coded order, evidence of betrayal tied specifically to the man who held it. No one moved. Then he stood. Calm, cold. "I know what you planned," he said. "I know who funded it. I know when you were going to act." He looked each of them in the eyes, slowly, one by one. "But I wanted to see how many of you would still come eat with the man you planned to kill." One of the officers reached for his glass with a shaking hand. Another stood abruptly, but said nothing. "You won't be executed tonight," Traoré said, his voice cutting the room like glass, "because that would make martyrs out of traitors. No, what comes next will be far worse." The doors behind them opened. Not guards, not soldiers, their wives, their children. All brought in silently, standing behind them. "They won't be harmed," Traoré said before anyone could panic. "But they will be told why you are being stripped of your ranks, your pensions, and your honor. You will go home in disgrace. You will be remembered not as leaders, but as cowards who dined with the lion and thought he was asleep." One man broke, fell to his knees, begged. Traoré didn't look at him. He simply turned to the waiters. "Escort them out. Let them walk past their families. Let the shame begin now." What followed wasn't blood. It was silence, then weeping. Then the sound of boots scraping marble as each man was led out past the people they once lied to. And in the center of the table, untouched, sat the original invitation. The last line, handwritten in gold ink, read, "Loyalty is proven in silence, but betrayal screams, even over wine." The next morning, the 12 resignations were printed in state media. No details, no trials, but the country knew. And from that day on, no one ever underestimated the man who smiles at traitors before taking everything from them, except their lives. It began with a name, just one, buried deep inside the metadata of a foreign intelligence memo intercepted by accident. Captain Ibrahim Traoré had already begun reviewing the material sent by Colonel Yusuf Barema's wife. And though the drive didn't absolve the man completely, it cracked something in the narrative. There had been a leak, yes. Suspicious movement, yes. But the fingerprints didn't trace back to Yusuf. They pointed to somewhere else entirely. France? Too obvious.